I have actually evolved to realize that more data doesn't necessarily mean better. Just because you have access to all of this capability and possibility and information and depth doesn't necessarily mean you're ultimately driving better outcomes.
Welcome to What Gets Measured, a NinjaCat podcast about marketing, performance management, metrics, and effectiveness. Because what gets measured gets managed. I'm your host, Jake Sanders. Kudzayi Chakahwata is the Audiences and Technology Solutions Director at Publicis. She has a master's degree in mathematics from King's College. She's worked every possible data analyst gig from in-house to agency. She's a Scrum Master and a highly versatile, business-focused, enthusiastic data leader with transferable skills from multiple sectors, and she's here today to talk about data analysis and marketing. Kudzayi, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for the invite. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, I have been looking forward to it. It has been a back and forth between us, audience, to find time because she's actually out there doing work.
Thank you for thinking that. No, yeah, literally, I am. But yes, I'm so happy that I've managed to meet you today. I know there've been at least one reschedule, if not more than one, but yes, we're here.
Yes, we are here, and that's the most important part. But I wanted to talk to you because going through your bio, seeing all the stuff, previous podcasts, interviews, it's such a fascinating combination that you bring to your job of math and marketing. And so your path from mathematics to marketing analytics is like intriguing. How has your expertise in complicated neural networks and advanced math shaped your approach to marketing analytics?
Yes, well, funnily enough, I don't think it actually put me at a direct advantage early on, not because having a mathematical background wasn't beneficial. It definitely was. And that started to come through a lot later. But in the beginning, I still had to learn a job from scratch as a marketing analyst. I still had to learn a new skill from nothing, not to underplay the significance of mathematics again. There was just too much to learn early on, all those years ago, over a decade, in order to perform even at minimum how to effectively pull data from a massive data warehouse via SAS and learn how to use Excel, not like a student or a school pupil, but as like a data professional, which is a totally different realm, and plus learning how to navigate the professional world. And these things took up all my brain capacity in those early days. But eventually, I do believe it's the high quality of the teaching, I would say, that I got from mathematics lecturers that I encountered that was very inspiring in terms of how I got a reputation in sort of companies. I won't say the industry quite yet. That's getting a bit above myself.
Right.
Reputation in companies for very clear, easy to understand campaign performance reviews and general analytics presentations, the ability to get into someone else's head who may not have the context, who may not have the background, and to tell them a story in a way that they can relate to, in a way that engages them, that's not only understood but can't be misunderstood. I would say that's the one thing that maths brought in relatively early and stayed with me.
Oh my gosh. Well, and that's one of the struggles of data analysis and data analysts is just like they're frustrated because I put it in the dashboard. I put this thing here, but they have to kind of market the marketing data analysis. I mean, like, and you said you had an appreciation that was sort of initialized from you getting this data pro job and like, whoa, there's a lot of technical things, there's specifics, there's ways they do things. But I really love what you said is getting into someone else's head. Do you think data analysts are lacking in that skill because they're so focused on data? They're maybe missing that bridge, or was like, how did you feel you bridged that personally?
I think it's quite a common gap. And I have to be careful in what I assert right now, because it's been a while since I've been directly in the field of data analytics. But certainly when I was in it, there was known to be almost two types of analysts in front of clients or stakeholders, because the thought of doing that would give people the heebie-jeebies. But they really knew their stuff with the coding, and they could make they could make SAS, they can make SQL or Python, do anything, literally anything. But in terms of them putting forward an engaging, easy to understand, actionable story, it's not going to happen. And you need some people to brief really clearly and to extract what they've done for that to happen. So that's one type. And then there's the other type who are deemed slightly less, perhaps, strong on the technical side, whether that's fair or not, I wonder, but are so good at the storytelling side, at influencing
Mm.
change, and to get all sorts of individuals, be they commercial, be they marketing or finance, to act on the back of the data that they have gone through and rooted through. So I do think there is this conception that you have two types of analyst, and there needs to be a bridge. So
Mm.
how I tend to consider myself one who leans more towards the storytelling side of things, but that's not to say immediately that I don't consider myself having a technical background. I evidently do,
Mhm.
but I just really enjoy the telling people a story part. The most
Mm.
enjoyable moments, I'd say, in analytics were when we're either in a room or on a phone line and just sitting through and talking through a campaign or maybe a particular initiative that went through with marketers and various stakeholders, and seeing them hit some aha moments or spark off debate between themselves about what they need to do next quarter or what they're going to change or how much they're going to perhaps revert back to what they were doing, or just those things are just really enjoyable to listen to.
I mean, does that come from? I just think like, God bless these people that are stuck in those spreadsheets, and because I love them, and we need them, the engineers and the data science folks, but is there some, like when you're saying there's the thought that there's two types, but is it an extrovert thing? Is it an introvert thing? Is it like a comfort with strangers or something like that? It seems like you're very affable. You have a jocular nature. Me and you have played around an email in fantastic ways. I was like, oh, this lady gets it, and but so were you always like that? Or, like when you were heavy into math, were you like, nah, man, like the methodology, the models, those are the most important things. Whatever you do with that, I don't care. Like, do you think that there's sort of like maybe something in the training of data science that needs to hit on this bridge capacity?
That's a really good question. That's very deep, actually, because, yeah, I'm beginning to debate with myself internally now whether you just have someone being born in a particular way
Right.
and that kind of manifesting in the type of analyst they become, should they choose that profession,
Right.
or is it something you can actually teach, something you can train, something you can actually coach?
Hmm.
And from my experience of having led analytical teams of multiple sizes and in various contexts within a business, be it commercial, be
Right.
it product focused, be it customer focused, I actually don't believe necessarily in the hard rule of there being two types of analyst. I genuinely think anybody who wants to explore sharpening a skill in one end or another can learn if they are given the environment where they are coached and supported through it. And that's what I genuinely think. And so those who are really deep into the technical, if they have the desire to become better at the storytelling side and want to present in front of stakeholders, I think it does people and analysts such a huge disservice by just hiding them in a dark cupboard coding, when in fact they want to work on that, but they may not have the skills now.
Right.
So yeah, it's a tough one. I genuinely think anyone who wants to mold themselves can do.
Well, and I think you're living proof of that. Like just like what you were saying is that you came in from the math and then you were so busy learning the new job that you just started to learn how to naturally incorporate the things that were required, which is small p politics, which is the marketing of information, the
Mm,
packaging, those kind of like thinking of it as a product, data is a product, so like I have to explain it,
right.
like rather than thinking that these people need learning, you have to help them. And so I think
Oh, absolutely.
it's just a brilliant take on that. But I wanted to talk more about data because
Yeah.
you said in a recent interview about the
Uh-oh.
importance of not being data cowboys and cowgirls and the shift toward responsible data usage. What were you getting at here?
I'm wondering if that came across rather badly.
No,
I,
no. Well, did it? I mean, let's see.
I have to just say, as a disclaimer, I've always worked at companies who took compliance in this space very seriously.
Yeah.
The difference back then is that it was an area that was deemed to be another department's responsibility.
Like a
So by
legal
the time
thing.
the data, yeah, right, exactly. So
Right.
by the time the data was in front of us and we were sitting in front of the database, it was just a given that all the vetting, all the proper processing, all the insurance of consent and so forth, etc., had already been done under the watchful eye of a huge legal governance and security department. So any data appearing in the warehouse, I could put my boots on, put a saddle on it, and go with it. Now it's quite different. And whether it's a time thing or the different type of industry I'm in now, I can't quite say because I've almost changed industry over time. So separating the two is a bit difficult right now. The world, I think, is just more complicated as we stand, with cookies, no cookies, cookies, no cookies, and oh yes, cookies, and then consent and privacy. And we as consumers, right, we're becoming far more savvy about the antics of businesses and how they use our data. And so there needs to be an extra layer of care and awareness that isn't just left to the teams with whom it's their remit to do it. We all have to look out for it now, which is the point I was making in that data cowgirls and cowboys remark.
Right.
Not so much that we didn't care about it, but as an analyst, as an analytics professional now, or a scientist, we can't just assume the data in front of us, we're just ready to use it as we wish. There needs to be that extra check, that extra step of actually, has it been consented? Have we got sign off? And just before actually jumping in, just to make extra sure that nothing slips.
Right. And you were talking about quicker time frames, like go to market. Like, you think that's one of the pressures? Is just like, yo, we have the data. It could be good. It could be bad. Just use it. You know. I mean, is that just a function of people's inability to chill?
It certainly is. And that's where it comes into the picture that if I hear a discussion like that, I would have to put the brakes on very firmly and say, but wait a minute, we do need to understand and see proof that there has been the correct permissions and etc. coming behind this data before we do what we want. Whereas, of course, a team would have likely already had it run through them, but you don't want that one situation where you don't check to be the one which causes a massive issue, right?
Right. And you don't want to slow people down. I think a lot of people are thinking like accountability, ethics, that's for suckers. You know what I mean? Like, if we have it,
Right?
let's
Oh, God.
use it. And so is that sort of that looseness, that cowboy appeal? Like that's kind of what you're getting at there.
Yes, that is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But I'm at the point where I would rather actually cause a delay to have the checks than go ahead and find something wasn't in place because the consequences of the latter will be absolutely dire.
Right. And it's something that I think you have an international scope and an international appreciation, and you've been working in Europe, which they have stricter policies
Yes.
sometimes not. And, but eventually the law will catch up with you. In the US, it's a bit, it's a bit more free, I guess is
Right.
what we'd like to say. And then that doesn't mean that it's better. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have problems. It's just an interesting dichotomy to think that, thank God there aren't such strict, CCPA, like I'm sure California cares, but there's a little bit of a thought that isn't that great that we don't have to deal with that so much. But everyone who's really smart knows that you have to. Is it just that dumb people have grabbed the megaphone of marketing and data responsibility, and we're just like, it's all good, Like, is America to blame here?
Well, funnily, in that I did find myself quite jealous of the capability that is possible within America and how limited we are in terms of what we can do right away, in terms of especially things like developing a very deep understanding of consumers outside of begging clients for their own data. We can't really do that as soon as you start leaving the US for the most part. Of course, there's some varying degrees on the spectrum of which it's possible. But then I have actually evolved to realize that more data doesn't necessarily mean better. Just because you have access to all of this capability and possibility and information and depth, doesn't necessarily mean you're ultimately driving better outcomes. But in the case of the capabilities that I've seen and we know of in a lot of companies, I'm not talking about mine specifically, as I want to keep my job. A lot of the time, these really deep capabilities, in some sense, do have greater media efficacy. But that's not to suggest that it can't be replicated for clients in the absence of that depth of capability or that extent of capability. And I think we have to be a bit careful to not necessarily make the conclusion that more data is better, less data is bad.
That's so
You can
good.
do a lot with a little.
Yes, and that goes to before we were recording. We were talking about garbage data being sort of a cop out because,
Yeah.
like, of course, we'd all love to have the cleanest spreadsheets, and the data is so refined and so normalized. Well, of course, we'd all like that, but a lot of us are not dealing with that, and we're still going. We're still working.
Yes.
So I think, like, is there something that you've learned about looking at what is quote unquote garbage data? And do you have you built a sense of what is actually good? Can you look at a garbage heap of data and say, hold on now, there is something good here and I don't have to clean it all to figure it out? Like, is that a sensibility that you get through time and experience, or is there some kind of way you navigate those things?
It definitely is. In over time, I have certainly developed a skill to, I wouldn't say, sounds a bit too much to say I know exactly what data is needed to make a particular conclusion,
Sure, sure.
but certainly the ability to look at a lot of data, having a particular end goal in mind or something that a business wants to find out, and being able to very quickly discern whether or not a database is going to get you there and diagnose as to why. Is it because it's just absolute dirt and we just can't use it, but it is the right theme of information, or is it the wrong information, full stop, or is it incomplete, or whatever it may be? So I
Right.
think that is a skill you just acquire over time for sure, and especially as it relates to business context, which
Right.
is another kind of area in analytics which is so key, which is often neglected in focus of heavy deep tech skills. But I think having that perfect union between a deep understanding of fundamentally where a company is trying to go and what they need to do to get there, and understanding the part data can play, you develop that sort of sixth sense, which it feels like a sixth sense over time, but that's not
Right.
to say it can't be taught.
Right. And yeah, and it can't be felt. I think a lot of people are waiting to be taught something, but they need to experience things and feel it and then embody what that sense is. So it's kind of a
Yes.
heady mixture of technical prowess, but then also a willingness to inquire inside. But then also, this isn't just you. This is that business goal, that end goal. Like if you have that,
Yes.
and so it kind of goes into my next question. I mean, my
Ooh.
next one was, what do you think most brands and agencies get wrong about data? But then I was going to ask a question about
Ooh.
context, because I think maybe a lack of context is what people get wrong about data. I'm jumping ahead, but just
Ooh.
tell me what you think in simple terms. What do you think brands and agencies, marketers are getting wrong about data?
I would certainly touch on your point about context for sure, not getting ahead at all. It's a great one. But I'd say certainly thinking that data is a panacea for all corporate ills is one thing. And certainly to deviate a bit, overworking analytics teams, not setting clear roadmaps and priorities so we all understand direction of travel, and the teams then end up constantly hammered with piecemeal contextless requests which lead to analysts not seeing the value of their hard work, treating data functions or analytics as service functions, thinking, as I touched on before, thinking with respect to data that more data is better, and focusing too much on data, technology, and tooling with disconnectivity from people and outcome.
Right. Woo-wee. I was Mark Staus is a dude I had on the show previously, but he was talking about the most important part of digital transformation or any kind of transformation is
Mm,
the people, the
yes.
processes, and then the technology. So we get it all confused. We are thinking that if we get the platform or we get the tech, we'll get the people and the processes will come from that. But
No.
well, Kudzayi saying no. I wonder why.
Oh, yeah, that was a question. Okay. Yeah, I've seen that a lot, multiple times over, in that if you don't go through people first, there is no sophistication of tech or platform or tooling or data that's going to change anything whatsoever.
Right.
I think the people element is the most challenging, which is why I think a lot of people avoid it and bury themselves into what's relatively easier, the
Right.
tech and the tooling, as it's just definitive. Whereas without getting through to people and working on the cultural nuances of the organization, you're pretty much wasting your time.
Right. I mean, when talk about the cultural, I mean, like at a big firm like Publicis, I mean, like how are you navigating that thing that you just explained? Getting the people right, getting the processes right, and then having tech be a thing that leverages those things. How do you do that in like such a broad capacity? I mean, you have like hundreds of thousands of spreadsheets and presentations that need to be sent out every Friday. I mean, like what does that look like inside Publicis? I mean, as much as you can tell, because I don't give away your secrets, but it seems
Of course
like,
not.
well, you're not hurting for business. People are signing up. How do you navigate that inside Publicis?
Yeah, I'll speak about myself
Yes.
in the sense that it's very, very difficult to remain connected to what I've mentioned, people and outcome, as opposed to kind of getting swallowed in the tech and tools, as
Right.
I sit in a data and tech team in terms of where I am. So a lot of the discussions heavily evolve around those topics.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to honestly pinch myself and remind myself in multiple conversations to always have that focus when conversations start to run away with themselves on
Mm-hmm.
a fancy bit of technology or some connectivity between databases or obtaining a partnership with a provider who can tell us a lot more very interesting and fascinating things about groups of customers that we can actually connect to our own internal databases through a particular fancy nice mechanism. That's as vague as I could possibly make it without getting into trouble right there.
Right.
But then I have to constantly remind myself, as impressive as this looks, we can't just run in and pile into these things. We always have to be conscious of, okay, we buy, say, this data set or have a contract with this data provider.
Uh-huh.
What's the appetite of the people on the ground who are actually face to face with the clients to actually dive in and use this? Is it really relevant for them? Is it actually going to improve outcomes for their clients in terms of tangible business metrics? And so that's the sort of thing I find myself almost having to put the brakes on and constantly ask. I don't always get it right. It's often the excitement of platforming and tooling because there's so much kind of iteration in the field that is
Yeah.
very exciting. You can get carried with it, but I always have to put brakes on and think that to myself and to think of the people and think of the outcomes
Right.
in
Yeah.
addition to the fancy tech and tools and
Well,
process and methods.
it's so brilliant because I think that does go into this next question about context. And it isn't only about business context. You said something about the appetite for data usage. Like, what are y'all hungry for this? Like, would you pay for this? Because some of them, I mean, I know from, NinjaCat, we have dashboards aplenty. Very few stakeholders log in to the dashboard. And well, we have it. All the data's here. Well, they don't, they're not going to look. So, it's like their context needs to be appreciated. Data analysts spend all their lives with their heads in spreadsheets among the content of marketing data, but the
Yes.
contextual understanding is going to be the only way you're going to reach full utilization. So like, is it context of the audiences that are inside the data sets, or like when you're speaking about context, it's not just business, is it? It's broader.
It is broader. And I'd say almost before diving into that context point is you mentioned something quite interesting in terms of when stakeholders with a pile of dashboards and they hardly log in. And I would assume that they would have requested that, likely putting a team under duress to produce them, to only not look at it. And so I think over time as well, you do develop. And I know it's annoying to say a bit of a sixth sense, and because there are questions you can ask, but you eventually develop a sense of whether you're being asked a question and it's going to result in something that's going to really embed itself in an organization and be looked at all the time, or whether it's going to be a very fleeting request that it'll just pass by in the moment, and it'll be something that's never paid attention to again. And that is where a sort of understanding of people comes into it. When people
Mm,
ask for a particular piece of analysis or a particular bit of data, it's
mm,
very rare that they're actually asking you for that.
mm.
Which I know I'm probably opening a whole other can of worms, and I need to answer your question about
No,
context.
no, yeah. Feel free to spend time on those worms because I, as a marketer too, I was like, y'all asked for this, whatever website or
Mm,
creative or something, and they're like, but they didn't want that thing. They wanted something else, but y'all didn't tell me what you wanted. And so, like, I think everyone else is like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So don't worry about spending time on that. I think that's amazing.
yes, yeah, and it does link into context, because I say context really is king, and because without it, you're not doing an analysis, in my opinion. I think there is a pandemic, and which had never quite ended, on the lack of connection with customers, from data and analytics functions and teams, or I would even say clients, on the one hand, and kind of there's been a severing of that connectivity between analytics as well and tangible business benefit, and so they're two things that have happened. And I think the main sort of reason why context is so king and it's so lacking is because those links in so many organizations have been completely severed, and sometimes intentionally. That there are some functions who actually believe it's not an analyst's place to actually understand the business context. It's down to us to give it to them. And I think that's one of the, yeah, I've been in, no company names will be mentioned in this time, but I've been in situations like that exactly. And I think it causes a lot more problems than it solves, because everybody rinses a business problem through their own lens. And by the time it gets through to a data or analytics team, it's evolved into something, and they're trying to explain it in the form of data language, which they don't know. And something comes out that doesn't solve the problem, and you're continually chasing your tail. Then people start to say, we don't get any value from our data function. It's just like, well, well, I won't say the next phrase. I'll try and keep my language clean. But well, hello, then I'll put it that way.
Well, but I love that they asked for that. And then they're like, nah, what? We just busted our butts to get this thing for you. But I think maybe what this gets to is not maybe the idea of data not being something that it's weird. It's like there's a confirmation bias that people approach data with that is internal to them, but then they want the data to change their thinking. And then, so it's like you have to have a strategy and strategic, grounded business context questions. But then once the data comes out, they're willing to switch. They're willing to, oh, whoa, we got to pivot. We got to pivot. We got to pivot. What I'm actually looking for is not something that tells me it's good or it's bad. I kind of want you to shake me out of my confirmation bias. And I want you to get us off a strategy on this new exciting thing. And I think a lot of people are saying, I don't want to hold tight to strategy because I'll miss something exciting. I don't know if this is related to what we're
Mm.
talking about, but I'm just kind of thinking of like what you just said kind of sparked the CEO does not want to hold down a strategy in regards or despite or in tandem with data. It wants data to show them a new strategy, a better way, a new exciting thing. And you idiots, wrong or no?
I just couldn't help but to laugh as soon as you started to say that. And in that, again, it's one of the key errors as to why people expect data to be this sort of panacea to all their business problems. And I've constantly observed that exact tendency to overestimate data's universal area of influence with complete ignorance to the perimeters of its limitation. And I've had marketers as stakeholders who tried to excessively lean on when I was in analytics functions as their own replacement for any original pioneering or strategic thinking. So it's the whole, we don't know what we're looking for. So we just need you to pull a ton of data. So we may or may not make up our minds on the back of what it does or does not reveal, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. So no, the idea of saying we don't really have any strategy here. We just want data to show us exactly what to do. It doesn't it doesn't work. And if anyone is in a marketing position now who's thinking of doing that to their data teams, I just, your data teams likely reach out to me for some kind of pseudo therapy is how these things end. I can promise you they're not happy. They are cursing your name. It doesn't work like that. Okay, I have to explain myself now in
Yeah,
terms of
well,
having
no, but I'm
completely
wondering.
obliterated marketing teams.
Yeah, no, keep going.
Right? In that data is a piece of a puzzle. It's not the full picture. And we need to understand the sort of at least a sketch or a point of view of where we're heading in terms of putting together all the pieces to build that full picture. We can't then make a whole puzzle for you and we only have one piece. And which is how it really fits in. Data is a very, very powerful component, but it has to be wielded correctly. It has to fit in an organization correctly. And that particular fit, which I may be talking about organizational structure, will be different depending on the exact type of company. But too often I've just seen it used as this overall, we want to lean on you for everything, and it backfiring. It does not work. You don't necessarily have to have a perfect strategy totally laid out, but you have to have something to go with in order for us as an analytics team. I mean, I'm no longer an analyst, but I always identify as one, to come in and tell you that's not realistic. In order for it to be realistic, this is what will have to happen, either to market conditions or to this company. But we need some tracks to run on first. We
Right.
can't develop something out of nothing. And this has turned into a bit of a therapy rant. Sorry.
Well,
I'll pause right there.
I'm pretty sure half of the audience is lying down, just saying, yes, yes. Speak more. Tell me why do you feel that way? No, but I think you're saying something that every marketer of any type or sales, I mean, anybody who's in business has felt this, has understood this. Like, we just need the sales thing to go. That's the answer. We just need this marketing thing to go. That's the answer. We just need this data to go. That's the answer. We just need financial tightness and, more reoccurring whatever loyalists, So it's happening all over the world, but let's maybe even get more into that mindset, because where the hell does this idea come from that data is going to just completely change our lives? Is it that there has been a instance where somebody looked at data and totally changed the game? Or is it that people who are selling us the data tools are telling us this lie, getting us to kind of get on board with the idea that there is a bit of a crucible, there is a bit of a holy grail, there is a bit of a magical Arthurian tale, and it is up to you to pull that data sword out of the lake? Is it a myth? What the hell is it based on, Kudzayi?
I love that question as well, as I would say we all have to claim responsibility for that, honestly, in that there was a lot of excitement about, all the trends that have come and gone, such as when people used to say big data and all of the things that have evolved over the years. And I do think it is partly the industry's fault in almost not necessarily overstating the power, but I think a lot of companies, when I first started, didn't necessarily understand how to utilize the data that they house properly, or if they
Right.
didn't have it, not seeing the value of it. So I think there had to be a lot of kind of selling and kind of pushing it to be used. But at the same time, there may have been the tendency to either overstate exactly what it can do for a business. Maybe I'm just guessing here, or there may have been an overcorrection the other way, such that a quite damaging phrase started to come into the data culture a good few years ago, data driven.
Yeah.
The two words that I hate almost nothing more than. And yeah, exactly. And so I think we did contribute and we did fuel that. It was a bit of a hit out of saying companies are ignoring data and they need to value it as it can actually make positive differences to their outcome. But at the same time, there was a bit of an overcorrection, at the same time needing to actually articulate exactly where its place is, instead of it being interpreted or having it being run with something that should drive an entire business, which is not. So I point the fingers at professionals like myself, as well as the interpretation as well. And we just have the comms work to do again, to
Right.
really, really articulate exactly how it should be used, where it sits, how to leverage it for outcome.
Well, and I'm glad that I'm a part of that process, because, I work for, a data management, software solution that can come in here and be the bridge. But what I've seen is that the success of this product that we have is dependent on the teams using it.
Yes.
And their abilities to understand how to get their processes tight, how to ask those better questions. Those people are always happy. But the people who have messy data systems, messy processes, no clear delineation on an approach, or they're having that sort of tell me, Oracle, magical, and Oracle pun not intended, but maybe, tell me, data Oracle, like, what should we do, you know? And God bless these people for wanting sure bets, but shame on us for not telling them the actual hard work, which is just work that needs to go in to make any of these things happen. All of these things should have changed the game 100%, 1,000 times over if they were doing what they said they were doing. But the only way they work is when people who want to work with it. And is that,
yes.
that's it. I mean, you know, are we done? Did we solve the problems?
I don't know. Right. I know. That should be some sort of written in stone.
Oh, yeah, that could be one of the commandments. Yeah. You know, it's like, no one's coming to save you. Oh boy, I would love to hear that. Wait, tell me why you hate data-driven. Just kind of, because, are you following data? Kudzayi? Or are you just not liking cool terms?
Well, the reason why I don't like data-driven is for the precise reasons that I think I've gone on a rampage about earlier, in that it's the sort of slur that everyone else needs to sit back and rest back in their armchairs and just shove all the issues of the organization on a data or an analytics function. And if they don't correct it like magic, then they are the problem and we don't see value for them and we need to cut them. That's where the kind of hatred of that term comes from, because I've almost never seen it being used in a balanced way. Yeah, that's the only reason why I hear it and I see it written and think, oh, good God. And I know it was well intended.
Yes.
I know it was more about you need to consider data in terms of driving towards the outcome that you want.
Yes.
But I think, yes, the reason why I don't like it is it can imply you're going too far.
Wow. And I love it. That's a slur that shunts responsibility. That's all it is. It's like, oh, you're not data driven enough. I mean, and as a creative too, it's like I originally approached data driven. I was like, man, no, like this is a feeling. Like I'm here to inspire emotions and actions, you know. And is it data? Is it not? Well, let's see. Let's create data. Let's make data, you know. So, and then we can figure it out. But I think a lot of people are like, no, I need the data now to show that this worked, because then I can say that it's going to work, even if it doesn't, you know, but at least I had some data, you know. And you're like, it ends up being some kind of like hall pass, and also a slur. Like there's so many interesting ways to think about that. But I appreciate what you're saying, because yeah. Well, so here, can you give us a story time, because we're over time, but I mean we're not. Can you just tell me like a time from your experience when you were a data analyst, or you know in your current function, where you took your skills and penned a Cinderella ending for a client, and conversely, do you have any data analyst horror stories?
Yeah. Oh, let's go straight to the horror stories first.
Oh yeah, it's the best.
Right. So this is an odd one, because I guess they aren't horror stories specifically relative to analytics pieces, but they've been horror stories with respect to situations I've been in with respect to organizations.
Yes.
I'll start with a relatively trivial one, and then I'll pick some pretty awful ones as things happen later.
Perfect.
And again, this is a bit of a weird approach to your question, but I'll start going anyway, and we'll see where it lands.
Absolutely.
So when you start working as an analyst, there's a bit of an initiation that used to happen before cloud computing was much of a thing. I know it's been around for a very long time, but it hasn't really been strong in a lot of company tech stacks until, let's say, I started to see it maybe 7 or 8 years ago, being very, very prominent. Mm-hmm. So you used to write queries, and these queries would go to a physical box. And via a platform, this sounds so funny. People are like, oh my God, how old is she? Yes, I've been around a while. So, yeah.
So listen up is the point.
Right. So what could happen, long story short, is that if you didn't write a piece of code or properly, you could actually break the entire system.
Yeah.
And a lot of old school analysts would have had this initiation story when we would do what's now known as breaking SaaS.
Mm-hmm.
And in my first few months of my very first role as an analyst, I did bring the entire warehouse down, querying a table.
Mm-hmm.
This was, I'm sure colleagues wouldn't mind, it was back in EE, and there was a legendary table called the CDRs, which included every single record of every single interaction a customer had had
Oh
via their
wow.
phones,
Oh
be it a
wow.
phone call, be it a text, be it an instant of roaming for some data.
Right.
Great table with fantastic information, but you have to be really, really specific. And I forgot to filter it. I forgot a bit of a date clause. Oops.
Oh
As a
wow.
relatively junior analyst, and I brought the entire warehouse down. And business intelligence were obviously not very thrilled with me. So
I
that was
love
a bit of a trivial.
most horror stories do not star the person, which I love. That this is the humbleness of Kudzayi. Like she's like, hey, I've also been a part of this. I really appreciate that, because boy, there are some data folks out there going like, because there's all data stacks are held up by a toothpick. So be careful what you do around the toothpick. You know?
Yeah.
Oh my
that
God.
was a lesson learned.
Huge.
At the time, it was not funny, by the way.
Oh my God. No, it's a horror story. It's a horror story. But they fixed it. And yes, or did you destroy the whole thing?
Oh no. Oh, it was fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And things were up and running again a few hours later.
Oh. But still, it's just like, boy, time is money. And ooh, Kudzayi, why did we hire this mathematician?
Oh, right. Yeah. But now I find it very, very funny. So it's amazing perspective of something that seems like you feel feeling awful about yourself for an entire weekend. I was just mortified, and because I thought, oh my God, my reputation. I was a graduate at the time on an internship, and they could have got rid of me at any point in time. And the idea was after a year internship, I could be made permanent. And I thought, oh, I've screwed this up.
Yeah.
So that was one horror story. I think because we're over time, I'll touch on one more, which wasn't that trivial. And it was actually quite a bad one.
Oh.
I won't mention the company name, in that while presenting some fairly straightforward analysis, it was some profiling. There was a chairperson and a managing partner of a company just didn't, for some reason, they didn't understand the nuances about the methodology you undertake when profiling and comparing various audiences, whereby for the specific reasons that I was doing the exercise, I needed to compare the audience to a same base in order to get the profile, to assess the unique attributes of each of the 5 or whichever number of audiences I was looking into. Wow. So the data set with which I was comparing remained the same. And so the problem that they had was the base data set included individuals of the comparison data sets as well. And so, but then if you started to exclude from the base each and every time you wanted to compare each and every single one of the comparison databases, you don't have an even base to make comparisons between the audiences, right? But then it's basic stats. So I've gone off in a bit too much detail about that. They went off on one and were actually shouting at me. And it was a very junior analyst at the time. And this was one of the most senior people in the company who were just going absolutely mad. And I did not know what to do. I was just sat there like, is this really happening? I cannot believe this is happening right now. I can't. It's telling them that this is just standard statistical methodology that's in like the manual of analytics, but they weren't having it. I was a spore of the devil, and I was going to sever a particular relationship with some other team because of it, and they really went absolutely mad. But luckily at the time I had an amazing line manager who came in and kind of didn't, let's say, settle the situation, but made it clear that it's standard methodology. And it's actually the method that's in one of their main huge reports that goes out as part of reporting contractually every single month, which a contractor who was one of their favorites at the time actually built. So, but then I got no apology for it. So that's a second horror story, when like the worst reaction you could possibly get to a piece of work that was totally unexpected and uncalled for. So I'd say I'll touch on those two. There are obviously more, but I think I've talked your ear off already. But
no. I think that's great. Well, I mean, but then do you have some instance of it going exceedingly fantastic? Like, do you have one instance where you're like, all right, put a feather in my cap? Do you have one of those stories?
Yes, I do. Whether I go back in time, had a very, very nice time, I'd say, in Camelot especially, which was my last slot of actually being a hands-on analyst, and
Mm-hmm.
where I was quite a senior analyst back then, of all the work that was done and the analytical work that went in to increase the kind of sales performance of their online gaming suite. And so that was an amazing kind of ride to go on, in that ultimately a combination of so many factors came in, and analytics, in order to ensure that the business were very compliant. The compliance came into it as well,
Mm-hmm.
setting up a lot of tracking to ensure that consumers were, yes, spending money with the company, but at the same time keeping safe, and setting off alarms for things when potential markers for addiction came up in terms of addicted to gambling, alongside
Mm.
setting aside recommendations from analyzing the mechanisms of the games in order to make the underlying structural kind of winning mechanism such that it does encourage people to repeat play, but at the same time, whilst keeping them within those safe limits. Of course, in
Wow.
combination with product development teams and marketing teams and commercial teams, we then did achieve what seemed like an impossible goal of lifting weekly sales averages of that whole suite of games up by 40%. And I'd say
Wow.
that was a really nice kind of trajectory to go on, and to influence change, and to know that what you did played a part in ultimately shifting a business's bottom line in a real way. So I'd say that was one of my favorite moments.
Well,
And there have been more, as I've talked about. There have been a lot of horror stories, and I touched on too. There've been more nice moments. And right now, I don't do a lot of project work with existing clients. I'm mostly pitching, but winning, I can talk about it as it's gone public. Winning Lego was an absolutely great one in terms of contributing to that pitch here, worth $410 million in terms of potential annual spend with them. So that was really nice. And taking part in that was absolutely amazing and fun. The lovely group of clients who, well, just can't wait for more in that sense. Of course, there have been more pitches, which we don't know the result yet, so I have to keep absolutely quiet about it. But
yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'll say that's
don't
the
ruin
nice
it.
stories.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's
don't
so
get fired,
great.
Kudzayi.
Well, no, but you know what? But you said something really interesting, which was being able to see the results of data analysis and having a problem to work on, and then getting to see the behavior shift. That is huge. Do you think that maybe data analysts would be more excited or more enthusiastic about, broadening their skills as storytellers or deepening their technical prowess? Do you think that there'd be more if the data analysts were brought along to see their work? Or do you think that the data analysts are like, I don't care, I just work on this thing, but it feels good to know what the data is going to be turned into and the behaviors downstream? Do you think that maybe that could be something that people focus on, like bringing your data analyst to say, like, that hard work that you were doing that was like pointless, to you, or just like really painful? It made a huge difference. Do you think maybe one of the things that we could do is bring along data analysts, or like, what am I saying? Am I saying
You are
something?
making perfect sense.
Okay,
And I
good.
think it's an absolute must. And I don't think it should be optional. As in a lot of companies I've been with, they especially larger companies, that's when it can become a very, very convoluted. Actually, having the data or the analytics teams in touch with the work that they're doing and the fundamental contribution in terms of actual tangible business outcome it's just absolutely essential. And if you can't do that, you've got to pretty much just stop asking them to do work that you're asking them
Mm,
to do. And
mm.
in a large organization, I don't mean get rid of your data function. I mean, in the context of a data team who have loads of stakeholders and they're kind of oversubscribed already. If you can't tell them or come back to them in X number of weeks, or that piece of work you did, this is what happened, here is how it was used, and here is the impact it had, either
Mm,
on a customer, on a business, or on some
mm,
operation in the
mm.
background, just stop asking us the questions. You'll be doing everyone a favor, because it's annoying.
It's annoying, and you're asking for work that you're not going to use, or I mean, like strategies that you're not going to adhere to, all of those things. I mean,
Right. We love to see the loop closed. We would love to see that a lot more often.
and what that whole is, how do you value a data team? Is it the lines of code that you're crunching? Is it all of these things that no, help them you can help them see the work that they're doing, and then in turn you will see the value of the work they're doing. So it's like it's a two-sided win there.
100%. And it's that development of that complete and utter collaboration, that almost symbiosis of an analyst with all the other functions that come together to actually influence where a business goes in terms of the direction. It's that which is the absolute key. There's nothing quite like it. I've been in one setup where that actually happened, and I'm telling you, there is nothing like it. The business benefit that will come of it will be like nothing you've ever seen. It's a very hard thing to get right and to set up, but it's worth the pain. It's worth the time investment to go through of having analysts embedded in the day to day, not being the last port of call to just flog when things go wrong or to bring in at the last minute without any context. We're kind of over that, to be honest. We actually want to be, as I quote in my LinkedIn, we are equally invested partners in outcome. So bring us along on that journey.
Quote bomb.
Yes. Oh, and agencies and businesses, marketers, in-house, working in the outhouse. I mean, everyone can win if we think the debriefing, the process, like what happened, keep you up to date. That can be hard for agencies, with thousands of campaigns in flight. Who knows? But if you make it a part of your process and it's just something you do, you will probably make your clients more money. You'll be smarter with your budgets. You'll be more willing to take risks. The upside is huge, but we could keep going, but I need to ask you.
I could talk to you forever, right?
I know this is kind of cool, but who knows? Maybe this is a new show. But one final question, just if you could consolidate everything that you said, and you could give one piece of advice to a marketer that's staring at a big lake of data, what would you say to her?
What would I say? Other than dive in, come meet me there, come visit my lagoon for
the
my
data's fine.
Seaweed. Yeah, exactly. Well, seriously, I would say, by all means, don't be scared of the lake. Come on, get in, join us. We want you to join us in there to the limits of your capacity and your time to understand our universe, and we would like to understand yours. But at the same time, please don't think that it would solve every single one of your problems. It's a very important, let's say, lake in the context of all the oceans that are in your world. It's a piece of the complicated puzzle, and you need to understand the significance of that lake and your marketing activity and how the two interact together in order to leverage it properly. And then how your marketing activity will then go on to impact a business tangibly. And in order to form that link completely it's the magic of the lake. Ask the right questions when you're standing and staring at your reflection in that data lake. Don't expect to receive answers from a vague point that direct you, because that's not what it can do for you at all. Lean on us as the professionals who are diving or swimming or sailing on it every single day, all the time. And we will help you voyage through it. And we want to guide you properly. But you must give us context. Our work or impact and even our motivation suffers without it. Collaborate with us. We don't only want you to think about bringing numbers and stats together. We all want to kind of bring the right people together, and that's where the magic truly happens.
Listen to the lady of the lake, okay? The lady of the data lake.
Hilarious.
That's going to be your new thing, because a lot of people are thinking you're going to throw a sword at him and make him king. No, you have to respect this lake. And you went off on lagoons and oceans, and I was like, yeah. That metaphor can be expanded. Fantastic. I cannot thank you enough for your time.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So if people want to connect and learn more about you online, how can they do that, Kudzayi?
That's the funny thing. My online presence is a bit rubbish at the moment, admittedly. But yes, LinkedIn, I'm very responsive on there. Honestly, very responsive on there, and always open to new connections who want to have a genuine conversation as opposed to sell me stuff. That'll be nice.
Cheese or chocolate?
Are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
Cheese or chocolate?
Chocolate.
No brainer. I don't know. This might be crazy. Coldplay or Radiohead?
Oh no, why are you doing this
Do
to
it.
me?
Do it. Say it.
Oh,
It's at the end.
Radiohead. Okay, Radiohead.
Oh, now why'd you say that?
Oh, I don't know. I just had to pick one, and it's impossible. It's the cruelest question you could have asked me.
Okay, good. All right. So you chose the right one. Okay, here we go. Not that there was a right answer, but there is absolutely
now, Jacob.
a
It's out
right
now.
answer. And so here I'm showing my ass. Okay, here. Swim on the beach or chill on the beach?
Chill on the beach. I've seen Jaws too many times.
There's Jaws 2, Jaws 3, Jaws 4. It doesn't get better. A stack of books or one book at a time?
Oh, one book at a time.
Yeah. You want to give your full brain to it?
Yeah.
It's a smart way to do it. Okay, now this might be contentious too. Cats or dogs?
Oh no.
Choose
Oh,
one.
that's even worse. I'm afraid I have to go with cats.
Okay, don't be afraid.
I just love their indifference.
There is something so cool about that. They are over you, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the right answer, but it is. Okay, and then finally, a picnic table or a pivot table?
Oh. I'll be the sad person and say the pivot table.
Because you can control it more, or what?
Let's just say I've had more fascinating times in front of pivot tables than I've had on picnic tables. That's so bad.
What Gets Measured is a NinjaCat podcast. Please rate and review the show wherever you find your podcasts. Share this episode on social, and visit us on the web at NinjaCat.io.